And with us for this entire hour, Bahnsen Group founder and managing partner, David Bahnsen. Nice to see you, Mr. Bahnsen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mondani, fresh off meetings on Capitol Hill, closed doors, of course. David, how do you see this? We've discussed it, but we continue because more unfolds as these Democrats kind of come on bended knee to kiss the ring of the anointed one. And as we find out more about what he truly believes.
Well, it's obviously radical. It's obviously extreme. And there's nothing that someone like me can say about it that's going to be good. I do expect the Democrats to mostly end up getting in line. I don't think you're going to have that many holdouts in the end that say, look, we don't want to touch this radicalism. It could hurt us in midterms. I think politically they should do that, but I don't think they will. What's interesting is that I'm taking an angle about my own backyard. I wrote an op-ed at foxnews.com just suggesting that this is where all populism goes. I don't like seeing it from the right either when we start competing with each other for who's going to give away more things. So his absurdity that they're going to have city-run grocery stores or that they're going to have all of these handouts, it is Marxian. It is anti-market. He's not. The difference is he's explicit in his anti-capitalism. I want us to reject this populism with every ounce of breath in our body.
I do think that there's a general push to populism, but I still do think there's a choice people have between a populism that favors state control and a populism that favors individual control. But
of course there is. And these differences of degree matter a lot. But my point is that by definition, populism is something being done because it's popular, where those of us on the right believe in doing something that is rooted to natural rights, constitutional freedoms, and there has been demonization of markets on the right. That's undeniable over the last 10 years. It is not coming from the same place as Marxian radicalism that this guy's doing.
Right.
But my point is, philosophically, I want us to hold on as hard as we can to Reaganite principles that actually do value private property, that don't, there's demonization of the rich from the populist right, and that's what I'm referring to. We don't get to pick who we don't like because of how successful they've been. That's the element I'm getting at.
You say that the media is not taking him seriously. What about the Republican Party? The New York State Republican Party boss said he's a gift. He's a gift to us. No, he is not a gift. He is part of a movement that you need to stop.
They don't seem to understand the math of having 3 people run against him. If the majority of people are against him and there's 3 people splitting up that majority, then he still wins the election.
Yeah.
So the electoral math here matters.
Democrats and liberals, they dismiss your hard work, and then they rise up in power, and then they want to destroy and take what you have made. But Republicans, on the other hand, so what if someone comes from money? They want to give you the opportunity to make your own. And they champion success, and they want to lay the foundation for you to rise up and build your own dream. They're not going to tell you what that dream is, but they just want to get out of the way and allow you to harness the freedoms that are guaranteed to you in the Bill of Rights. David's making a face, but when he says, when Mondani says, I don't believe people should own guns, that's a guaranteed right in this country.
Right.
And I'll be damned if you're going to take that away from me.
Well, I'm in 100% agreement, Dig. And I think when I hear all of these things that we're so universally concerned against on this set, it reinforces for me the motivation that our party not go there, that when Republicans start demonizing billionaires, that's what scares me. I expect it from this spoiled brat. This is their ideology. This is what has become, and this is the AOC and Bernieization of the party. The Democrats were not always like this. They were always more left-wing than I was, but they were not this class warfare driven. And that's why I'm making the point I made, that I see class warfare entering the fray from the right at times, and for the very reason you're pointing out, that's why I want to reject it. If you talk about gun rights and other constitutional rights, 100%. And Gary brought up something at the beginning that we haven't talked on at all. We're fully focused right now on his economic disaster. The anti-Semitism is at another level. and it is explicit,
right.
and there are so many Democrats willing to just ignore it. So this is both progressive debacle as it pertains to Marxian economic ideology and their relationship with Israel that speaks ultimately to what they really believe about the American ideal.
Well said. What do you think about the rate cut conversation here? Because you've got the president talking about big rate cuts, but you've got some of these Fed guys, more and more of them saying, we probably should be cutting. Do you read the data and see that?
Well, first, let me just start off by saying I do not believe that 12 PhDs around a conference room table are necessary to set the price of money. That is the system we have. That's the system the president wants. It's the system the central bankers want. I don't believe in it. I think lenders and borrowers can set the price of capital the same way we set the price of everything else until the new mayor of New York City tells us what a hot dog has to cost.
Right.
But my point is that I believe in rules-based monetary policy and that we have an interventionist system. In fairness to Jay Powell, Gary, I'm pretty much in agreement with you on everything. He didn't do the whole $9 trillion. He did half of it.
Right,
and he got $2 trillion off of it. He reduced the balance sheet by $2.2 trillion since the peak. The fact of the matter is that he lowered rates to zero in 2019. Who was president then? President Trump. He says because the stock market, I would say the stock market and credit markets, credit spreads had blown out. He panicked and he gave President Trump a huge gift of additional monetary stimulus when it didn't really make a lot of sense. The reason I want them to cut rates is because there is not the inflationary fear that should cause them to tighten, and they're above the natural rate. They're above the natural rate. Ultimately, I don't think it should be at 1. President Trump would want it at 0 always. He's a levered real estate investor. He says this, I favor low rates. That's fine, but that's what every president's going to want. That's why the Fed independence matters. The fact of the matter is, if President Trump were to fire him and they put someone in who cuts rates, the short-term rate goes down and the long-term rates will go up.
Exactly.
It will offset what the president wants. So he's got to let this play out. I don't think Jay Powell's right for what I'm about to say, but the reason he hasn't cut is because he doesn't want to look like he's giving in to the president.
Let's consider just for a second, though, people are trying to buy a home and can't because rates have remained high for quite some time now. Small business operators who say that their number one problem is high rates. I think there needs to be a serious think here about what's going on in the economy. We've seen inflation come down. We've seen PPI this week, Producer Price Index, which is a forward-looking mechanism on inflation, coming down. I mean, it seems like all signs point to a cut.
But, Jerry, the Producer Price Index was revised up from 0.1 to 0.3 for last month. The Consumer Electronics PPI was up almost 1% on the month. It was mixed data, but I agree with you about house prices. The mortgage cost is very high. But here's the thing. What's the number one problem why a home price is so unaffordable? Because
regulatory
prices went so high up. By having rates so low, we for 15 out of 17 years, a mortgage was 2 or 3%. All that did was boost prices up and make it unaffordable for people to buy a home.
That goes back real quickly to Jay Powell. Keeping rates at 0, people getting 3% mortgages, and who the heck wants to sell a house now buy one for 7%? So that's just another distortion he created.
Look, but you can't solve a distortion with another distortion.
Have been fired back then. It's too late at this point in time. But by the way, also,
I agree.
Jay Powell is a posturing, naked, political partisan hack. And they won't move because he's dug in on this hatred of President Trump, and his gal pal, Kamala Harris, didn't win despite him serving up a big fat interest rate cut right before the election.
Well, so
but if you what were you going to say?
My issue is that when Kamala Harris was vice president and Joe Biden was president, Jay Powell rose the rate from 0% to 5.5%. It was the quickest, most brutal thing he could have ever done to the economy.
And
he also brought it to 0 and kept it there when President Trump was president. I'm sitting here saying this as a critic of Jay Powell. I think he is dead wrong to not be cutting right now. But the issue we have to address is independence between Fed and executive branch. What he did was brutal to Biden-Harris. They telegraphed 1.5% of rate hikes and did 5.5% of rate hikes.
It wasn't brutal to Biden-Harris, actually, because they just stood up there along with Jay Powell and lied to the American people about the very financial cost of living suffering that they were experiencing.
The American people didn't buy it.
Let me finish.
Okay.
He blew out the balance sheet by an additional $2 trillion to sop up the spending unnecessary that Biden and company were doing. And so he blew out the balance sheet, and then inflation takes off. He didn't even start reducing the balance sheet until April of 2022, which was right before inflation blew up. And then in the vice grip in which Jay Powell put the American people in, it was the sky-high inflation and then the skyrocketing interest rates, and he just turned the vice on the American people. It was an unbearable cost of living crisis.
It would be better for all of us if a central bank would stand up to Congress when President Trump and Congress passed over $2 trillion of spending in the CARES Act and in the COVID aftermath, and that's when they added to the balance sheet trillions. You had a relationship between the Treasury Department and the central bank that I think is inappropriate. They should not be working together. The central bank should not be facilitating that kind of spending. Ultimately, this is what we've had since financial crisis, is a central bank that is accommodating the bad behavior of both executive and legislative branches of government.
I told you this was going to be a good conversation.
Remember Google Gemini's warped interpretation of historical figures? Well, President Trump sure does, because his next executive order is going to dismantle Silicon Valley's political bias, woke AI. Mr. Bahnsen, I come to you, sir. You've been talking about how government shouldn't be involved in these things. Is Donald Trump wrong to put out this executive order?
Well, I don't know what the executive order ultimately does. I certainly agree with the sentiment behind it. I don't want this wokeness coming through in the code and in the way these things are programmed and written. And I think that the president has a lot of authority on getting rid of wokeness and certain elements of governmental policy and departments and whatnot. So the anti-woke, anti-DEI agenda of the president is something that I've been completely supportive of. And I basically think corporate America may be clowned itself for a few years, but I never believed it was doing it ideologically. I always thought it was doing it because it thought that was the right commercial move, and they found out the hard way they were wrong. Well, I think that we should not be giving federal money to AI providers that provide wrong information. And if it's wrong because it's woke and wrong because of bad ideology, that makes it worse. But even if they were giving information that wasn't rooted to their critical theory, progressive, Marxian worldview, I don't want federal dollars going to AI providers that can't get answers correct.
That can't figure out a second term.
Well, it's going to be wrong.
You're looking at shares of Netflix here, falling. Earnings failed to impress investors despite topping estimates.
52 times earnings Netflix is trading at. That might have something to do with it.
What a deal.
52 times earnings.
Gen Z ghosting the 9 to 5. More than half say they are not loyal to their current job, even going as far as describing it as a situationship.
Well, it just so happens to be the subject of a book I wrote, and it's something I'm more passionate about than almost anything. But I wrote a book called Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life, and I did this by generational theory, looking at the differences from boomers to my own Gen X to millennials and now Gen Z. My own company employs people across all demographic, and I see the exact thing you're talking about, Brian, with Gen Z. The Gen Z workers, the cream of the crop, are the best we've ever seen. Their zeal, their enthusiasm, their desire to learn and grow. And yes, there is a significant amount that I think is entering the workforce with very unrealistic expectations. I believe sociologically a lot of it is that Gen Z workers were least likely of any generation in the last 100 years to have ever worked a part-time job as teenagers. They just were not working a part-time job that builds some of the resilience and habits that are very important.
I'm not so sure much has changed decade to decade. I think people who work hard, study hard, become very good streetwise, become successful. Others that don't want to get left behind. That's the way it is. The one thing I have noticed recently, and I've been really studying a lot, there are people making millions of bucks just putting up videos of themselves and creating
Gary's
businesses.
got influence.
Unbelievable. I'm looking at this.
There's a market solution, Gary, because there's people that have done this, made a ton of money as influencers, and then now what's happened is you have a lot of people trying to go do it and fail. And that failure will prove to be a good thing because you learn from failure. I think it's a little romantic and odd that so many people think they can take pictures of themselves playing with a cat and make a living, but many have done it. The fact of the matter is that there's a self-correcting mechanism in markets for this folly. That's what we're going. That's the stage we're about to enter, in my opinion.
I do agree with David's point, though, about the importance of work and pushing kids to think about work rather than just You know, like I saw this a lot at the university setting, kids' resumes coming into college, and it would be all these volunteer opportunities or clubs or extracurriculars, which are all fine, but I don't think there's any substitute for actually having a job and somebody else paying you to do the thing that they're asking you to do.
Why don't college kids work anymore? Because it's all put into their student debt.
And that's right. That's a good financial incentive to not work. Right. And it actually, so it has two negative effects. It puts them in debt, and it also fails to prepare them for work in the real world. Thankfully, though, I think a lot of Gen Z are getting out there and building businesses. And that's good.
Yep. And I can't wait. And I cheer Mom. And I won't look down on them. David, it was great to see you.
Thanks.
David Bahnsen, thank you so much for being with us.